Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. Now this is going to be a little bit of a different video. It is a book review, but I'm not recommending these books. These are older books that I've owned, my husband owned, that I look back and think, good God, what the heck were we reading to our children? And these are very dark, very strange books, and ones that are probably highly inappropriate, particularly for these days, some of which are depressing. The first book, speaking of depressing, and we have 3 copies of this. I don't know why. These were all inherited. The Velveteen Rabbit. This book is weird and very, very depressing. So, if you're not familiar with the story of the Velveteen Rabbit, basically a little boy gets this toy Velveteen Rabbit made out of velveteen for Christmas, and you have the animals coming alive. Yes, there were stories that were Toy Story was not a unique idea here. This book had done it long before. You see the nursery creatures. When it gets dark as a boy, I believe he gets Scarlet Fever, and they're told to burn all the toys once he recovers, and he gets a new rabbit. So he loved this rabbit like crazy, and then you get to know the animals living in the nursery, and then they burn them. So, with the exception of this rabbit who is turned by a fairy into a live rabbit. So that's kind of the end of the story, but again, they burn everything in his room. I do not know why they do this. I have to look that up. Scarlet Fever is not going to stay in your clothing or anything. I believe Scarlet Fever is actually, I have to kind of look this up. I believe that's what he has in the book. It's just a virus. It's not going to live on in materials for extended period of time. You could probably wash them. Even back then, they could probably have just washed them, but they decided to burn everything that he was sick with. So, slightly depressing and very weird. Again, we have 3 copies of this book, and it gave me nightmares because even now, and this is going to sound very odd, I can't shake my brain of my children's stuffed animals are going to come to life. Boom, we're not looking, which obviously is nonsense. But still, that's where it came from, was this very, very, very strange book, The Velveteen Rabbit. What the heck were we reading to our kids? The next one is poetry. And this is, this is going to be very common. This is one of the various copies. I think we have more than one. Untitled Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is a very old book. Now, could you read some of these poems to your kids? Yeah, but I would definitely push it older, because these can be very racist and very elitist in some of these stories, because of when it was written. I mean, this is when the book was written. This is definitely Old English, so yeah, this is copyrighted in 1978, but I'm pretty sure the original book was written much, much longer ago than that, considering it is very much of the early 1900s, of the British Imperial age. So the idea of the sun never sets on the British Empire, that is where you're getting the attitudes of this book. So the white Christian was superior to everybody, and it does show in a lot of these poems. So this is not something I'm going to recommend reading to your younger children. You might want to have an analysis of older kids when you're talking about the time period and some of the racism that was going on. It would be probably good to look at that time critically, but not something I would read to my younger kids. Again, the Child Garden of Verses. Robert Louis Stevenson is a very well-known author. I may cover more of his stuff, but this is the poetry, and it's questionable. The next one, a lot of people are aware of, and some of the publishings are still going on, is Babar. This was my husband's book, though I think I own some as well. Reading through this book, I'm like, oh dear. Again, this was definitely not necessarily British imperialism, though it's more French. The author, I believe, was French. But yeah, there's a heck of a lot of weird African racism in this book. So you find some questionable things here. It's a very common book series. I think there was dozens of them published. I've literally only read, I think, the first 2. When looking over this book for our daughter when she was a baby, I'm like, no. Just no. This is blatant racism. Do not read this book. Do not recommend this book. I think they should probably pull the publication or do something and rewrite it of some sort to make it fit. But yeah, a lot of African racism in here. Don't read this book. The next book is one of those old Hayne Christian Andersen fairy tales. This is the actual story of the Little Mermaid. This is depressing to an extent. I've heard some people, it's an accepting of death, but this is depressing. In the original story, she chops off, she gives her voice, but she also, walking is extremely painful. It's apparently like knives, so she splits her fin. The other thing is, unlike the Disney movie, which is far happier, she does not marry the Prince of the Den. He marries another girl who rescues him and another princess. She doesn't get him to fall in love with her. And essentially, because she's a mermaid, she's going to turn to sea foam. It's not some sort of curse. Essentially, she's just going to die. That's what happens to mermaids when they die. They turn to sea foam. Her sisters show up and tell her they chopped off all their hair, gave it to the sea witch, and she gave them a knife. It says, if you kill him and his new bride and spread the blood on your legs, they'll turn back to a fin. Yeah, I'm not kidding. This is kind of dark and depressing. She doesn't. She dives into the sea and becomes some sort of, not really an angel, but some sort of flying female thing. I think it's a cherub, which I'm not familiar enough with Christian mythology to fully understand what that is. But again, it's kind of depressing. I mean, yes, technically she goes up into the sky. She's not an angel. It's not like she wins a soul. It's specific on that she does not win a soul, that she was a fish. She did not have a soul, but she earns a chance to, win a soul or something of that sort. She wins a chance in immortality because she does not stab this man and his new bride to death, and she does not turn to sea foam. That's how this book ends. This is one of those, okay, that's weird and depressing, and no. And this is essentially, the copy I'm holding up was a reader's book. This was something I was given as a child to learn to read, as you can see the larger print here. So again, no, maybe for older kids, if you're looking at similar to the older Grimm's fairy tales, to analyze and look at this critically, yeah. But as a children's book, no, just no. And the last one is more of choice of words. This is a poem again, The Owl and the Pussycat. Now, this is this is a new book, but it is the identical to a copy that I had as a child. I was looking specifically for the artwork. Now, the artwork is absolutely, utterly beautiful. As you can see here, very detailed, very beautiful. But when you're saying pussy, 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 my love, you gotta have a slightly problem. Even though it's technically referring to a cat, again, the terminology is a little inappropriate. Did not realize it until I bought this and actually read through this book. It's like, oops. So this is actually not an old book. This is a new book of a book that I knew as a kid. Again, don't buy this book. As much as the artwork is absolutely, utterly beautiful, the choice of words, as well as it would have been great in the past, now there's a few sexual connotations going on here. And probably if your young kid starts speaking here, when it comes to these terms, they're going to shock a lot of people. So, great artwork. I do enjoy the poem, but the choice of words no longer fits with our modern culture because language shifts. So, that was a couple of books that I would not recommend. They're either, the terminology is outdated, or they're really just kind of screwed up tales, or of course with Babar. Yeah, that's the racism. Lots of racism in Babar. Probably, my daughter has a stuffed toy that belonged to my husband's. We're not going to be reading, at least not the first books. I may look at some of the older ones, but again, there's a lot of African racism, and it's very imperialistic. And that's what it is with most of these books, with the exception of Owl and the Pussycat and the Velveteen Rabbit. The other ones are, you find the imperialism, you find the strange Christian views of, yes, animals not having souls. Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on that. But so that was a group of books that I would not recommend, so I will not be linking anything in the description below with these books. But they're old children's books that, yeah, don't read. they have questionable ideas, or I just wouldn't recommend because they're extremely depressing. I mean, the Velveteen Rabbit, they're setting these creatures that you had met as characters on fire. It's depressing, all because of Scarlet Fever. Yeah, it's not a book you want to read to your children. It would probably traumatize them. I'm pretty sure it traumatized me. So that's the end of this review. If you like what I had to say, like and subscribe. Thank you.